Hey folks, this is Kelani. Welcome back to another video where I want to sit down and have a chat about the Battle of Dazar'alor raid tier. Whether we like it, whether we don't, what's good, what's bad, and where we've gotten to so far. So, for me personally, I've gone through Normal and Heroic and the first 3 bosses on Mythic. We're still working on Opulence, it's proving to be quite a wall indeed, although we are getting close. I would expect that to die fairly quickly, probably next week, and then we'll get onto Conclave, which should hopefully fall over, and then Rastakhan, which should hopefully fall over as well. Apparently Opulence is one of the bigger walls for the early bosses. Rastakhan and Conclave usually fall over pretty quickly from what I'm hearing from other guilds, so hopefully they won't be too much of a problem for us as well. And then of course we get to Mecha Talk, which is going to be a lot of fun indeed. So, how do we feel about the raid so far? Well, on Normal, I feel like quite a few of the bosses were maybe a bit too easy. Heroic kind of upped the game a little bit, especially when you got through the middle bosses, and then the last bosses were quite a big wall for quite a lot of guilds, including Stormwall and Jaina being pretty difficult to overcome, although at this point Stormwall Blockade has seen quite a lot of nerfs, so maybe that's not quite the wall that it was when we first went through on Heroic. As for the bosses and the encounters themselves, I think they did a pretty good job with the variety there. I don't think anything was all too similar. There are a lot of ads in this raid. Pretty much everything I think actually has an ad or two. You've got the first one which has ads which a lot of people are just padding away on, which makes for frustrating kill attempts when you're trying to get one of those higher passes, because you're not supposed to pad and they tell you not to pad, but you know everybody's padding anyway. Grong is pretty cool with the ads helping you control the mechanic of the fight. For the Jadefire Masters you have 2 bosses for the entire time, so multi-dot kind of goes crazy there anyway. I think Opulence has a whole bunch of ads actually, not to mention the 2 that you start with, and then Opulence is kind of weird anyway because you have all of the jewels. Although those jewels and those gems and those special effects, I think that's a fantastic encounter the way it is designed. I really enjoy Opulence, although the random swap on Mythic is quite frustrating to deal with, especially when people don't tell you that they're being transferred with a volatile charge, and then it gets dropped on everybody who's already standing. It's fine, I'm not sour at all about our Opulence wights, but Opulence is a pretty good encounter. I think they did a fantastic job designing that one. Conclave is again a fight with plenty of ads. Rastakhan has plenty of ads. Mecha Talk might actually be the only fight in there which doesn't really have any meaningful ads. It has ads for sure, but you just can't damage them and you don't really benefit from doing anything to them besides blowing them up when you're small. So that's kind of cool. And then the Stormwall Blockade does have ads, which you do need to kill, so yeah, multi-dot, go have fun. And then Jaina doesn't really have an ad. It only has 1 ad during the fight, unless you count all of the ice blocks. And hopefully you either shouldn't get all the ice blocks, or you'll only get 1 round of lots of ice blocks anyway, unless you're doing it wrong and you're probably all gonna die horribly anyway. So, as far as encounter design goes, I think they've done a fantastic job this time around with the Battle of Dazar'alor raid. I think this might be one of the best raid tiers that we've had in quite a while, actually. Uldir wasn't too bad, although I think more of the bosses were more standard kind of bland bosses that we've had quite a lot of already, and I think the whole environment wasn't super pleasing at the same time, whereas the Battle of Dazar'alor looks great, feels great, plays great, and I think this might be one of my favourite raids. We'll have to see if that changes going forward as we play things out on Mythic. If things get too easy, if they get too frustrating, both of those extremes can actually affect how Mythic raiding goes. I know, for example, and Taurus, Normal and Heroic was kind of a pushover, and things didn't really ramp up until Mythic. For this, I think Normal was a bit of a pushover. Heroic definitely upped the game on some of the bosses and made it so you actually had to do mechanics, although our guild still managed to brute force a few things, which isn't really ideal because we're having to learn what to do on Mythic instead of learning what to do on Heroic and then adding things on Mythic, because you can't really brute force Mythic. You either die or you don't on Mythic, whereas Heroic, your mistakes can get patched up quite easily, but that goes for pretty much every raid tier, I think. Now, if you've been keeping up with the channel recently, you will notice that we did the guides for Battle of Dazara'lor as well. We've been doing a few Mythic guides here and there. We've got all 3 that we've actually killed out, but obviously if I don't kill the bosses, I can't make the guides on the bosses. But either which way, people have been asking me, why did we get guides for Battle of Dazara'lor? Are you going to continue doing guides in the future? And the answer is hopefully, maybe, not too sure. People also ask me whether the guides are worth doing to begin with, and the answer is kind of no, which is kind of why I didn't do them for Uldir. The guides need to get a lot of views for them to be worth it. And then it's also a lot of videos just spamming the sub box. I really hate to do that, but people want the bosses faster, and I don't know, honestly, I'm a little worried about how the guides did, because usually boss guides do incredibly well, and the Battle of Dazar'alor guides didn't do too well, whether that was because we now have the Mythic raid being streamed live, so people know what they're doing, people can go check the method streams to figure out what the strat was there and use that instead of waiting for a guide, which is really cool. I really enjoy the Mythic streams in general, and I hope more guilds do decide to stream, because from what I heard, Limit had a completely different strategy going into Jaina compared to Method, and seeing those two strategies kind of work side by side and work against each other, and seeing which strategy was best, I guess, would have been really cool to see live. Now, if that was just for Jaina, what about all the other bosses? I know a lot of guilds were 6 healing Gron, but what if some weren't? And, you get to see this race as it goes on. But I think that might be one of the reasons that a lot of the guides aren't doing quite as well as they used to. Even some of the bigger ones like Fat Boss aren't getting the views that I would typically expect them to get, which also makes me worry a little bit that people aren't raiding quite as much, or maybe they aren't interested in raiding as much as they have been previously, because throughout Legion, a lot of people were playing. That means a lot of people were raiding, and I know my guides for the Legion raids did considerably better, and I know pretty much everybody did considerably better for Legion videos in general. So that does make me worry just a little bit about the future of World of Warcraft, the future of raid tiers, and the future of those raid guides. We might do them in the future, we might not. Again, I really do hate spamming the sub box, and it's kind of well, how do we get around this? How do we make raid guides without doing them super quickly, which isn't really ideal because you want them quickly, because obviously you want to down the bosses as you kind of get to them, not wait a week for videos which by that point you don't even need. So I don't know, we'll see how that goes. I might continue doing the Mythic guides depending on how bosses go down. At this point I do kind of feel like my guild personally is behind the curve, so do those guides really serve a purpose anymore besides just throwing another video up onto the channel? I'm not too sure. But as I say, personally I'm having a great time in the raids so far. I'm really happy with how the bosses ended up. I'm pretty happy, I guess, with some of the transmog, although I would personally prefer if we went back to class sets instead of raid sets, because getting different pieces of cloth is kind of fun when they're actually different. When they're not different, it's always nice to be able to get your set and build that transmog faster, but the variety isn't really there. But I guess we do have a variety of other sources. It's just not quite as exciting as getting a piece from raid and being able to dress up as a mage and a priest and a warlock all at the same time. But I think they have done a pretty good job overall with how the gear looks coming from the raid as well. Going into this raid tier, I was a little bit worried about how the faction changing would work, but you do get over it fairly quickly. It is a little jarring having your racial abilities just swiped off your bar and then having something else to put down then for 3 bosses, but it is also fairly interesting that there is no faction imbalances for 6 of the bosses, because everybody's alliance for the middle 3 and then everybody's horde for the end 3. Can you imagine if you had access to the human racial on Jaina and were able to break out of an ice block with that stun break? That would have been insane, and everybody would have been taking just humans. But that's not the way it works, so there was none of those imbalances for those bosses available, although you didn't really get a choice on what race you were going to be, which maybe that would have been an interesting way to do it. I don't know how they would offer you that choice, and that kind of does get a little wonky with your class not being available for some races, but I don't know, I think the way that it worked out was actually pretty good, and I think it's definitely a nice change of pace being a different race for once. I know we're stuck on opulence right now, so I'm a human a lot of the time, which is quite different compared to being a blood elf, although it is a welcome change. I usually do use some costumes to change my race here and there, so not having to do that for a few bosses is kind of fun for me personally. I think the way that the story was told, though, might leave a little bit to be desired, especially when we don't have a cinematic for the end. I mean, Jaina just kind of teleports away, and then on the Horde side, we have no idea what's happened. I mean, I guess that's kind of how it's supposed to be, but it would be nice to see what happened to Mekatok, what happened to Jaina, and I guess we'll get to see that eventually, or we could just do the Alliance side and get to find out exactly what happens, or I guess talk to some Alliance players if that's your kind of thing. But you know, we don't really get a conclusion there on the Horde side, and on the Alliance side, you don't really get a conclusion for the Horde side either. And I know that's how the Battle for Azeroth has told their story up until now, but it's kind of frustrating not getting the full picture without playing both factions. Going forward, I wonder how that's going to work out, because I think this would actually be the last major part of the faction conflict for Battle for Azeroth, because after this, we know we're going to go to the Crucible of Storms, which is only a 2-boss raid, so hopefully that's going to be a nice little bridge between this and the next major raid tier, because 2 bosses isn't going to hold us over for very long, let's be honest, and we know the Crucible of Storms is coming with patch 8.1.5 sometime later on. That's going to be really fun, hopefully, and add a few more encounters into the mix. I hope we get something which isn't just a whole bunch of ads once again, but after that, we know where we're going. We're going down into the deep sea, and at that point we're probably going to be, oh no, we need to join forces again to kill this big bad who, you know, is more important than our faction conflict right now. Even though I'm sure the faction conflict will continue in one capacity or another, but I feel like this is going to be the last time that the Horde and Alliance are really at each other's throats. So I'm glad that the story was told that way, but I feel like we should have got something like the way that the Mythic dungeons worked, where we got to see the other side of the story, and I kind of do miss not having a cinematic at the end, because let's be honest, Blizzard cinematics have always been the best way to convey story, and in-game questing and whatnot has never worked all too well. But I've been blabbing on for a little bit too long about this topic, which I didn't really think I was going to, but hey ho, there we go. How do you feel about the Battle of Dazar'alor raid tier? Do you think this was a success, or do you think this could have been done a little bit better? Do you think this is better than Uldir, or do you think Uldir had a few more things going for it? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.